Thank you for joining us for this extended discussion based on the second sermon of our Real Love series. What's love got to do with it? Ooh. Was that the title?
I think that was the title.
Very clever, Pastor. Yeah. Very clever. Love the sermon really on 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. It felt like that if we applied a lot of what you talked about, what Paul says in 1 Corinthians, that a lot of these specific issues or examples could be resolved. Is that why you approached it from that standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, the Bible doesn't speak about fighting biblically or cordially in the context of marriage. So I prayed and thought through the week, like, how do we respond to people? How do we treat people? How do we talk to our spouses? And I just thought the best picture is love. I mean, and then I started to study that out and realize all of the verbs of love. And if we do these things, then you really eliminate conflict and arrogance and selfishness and all these other things. So that's the reason I went that route.
Well, you talked about how when people come together, they get married, that they find out how different they are. And a specific example you used was the bathroom. Kandi, you were kind enough to send us photos of evidence of how different y'all are in the bathroom, and we had multiple questions pertaining to that.
Let me stop you there. What's funny is all week or the last few days since then, I've been getting texts from people of both sides of the bathroom lately, which is so funny, yeah. And unfortunately for me, I am more like the women in our church, unfortunately, so.
There were multiple questions about—
What do you mean?
What hair product
mostly
you use.
The pictures I got were of women's sides just with stuff everywhere and makeup.
Really?
And, yeah, mostly the men's sides, i.e. Colin, was perfectly pristine. Yeah,
Stephanie.
Colin's perfectly pristine. Stephanie and I are very similar, so.
Yeah, we've determined that a long time ago, though. Here's one. Someone wants to know what beard products Robby uses. How much time does it take in the morning for you to need a fan and a heater? That
Here
one.
we go.
Heater in the morning, fan at night.
Yeah, yeah.
Lots of, I think we've just stirred up more questions.
Fan, like
or fan after work. I mean, yeah, it was a lot of.
People also wanted to know, do other rooms reflect this same personality? Like, is the bedroom one side messy and one side neat?
Of course.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah, so I got books by the bedside, books in the, I got books everywhere, and so
we have bookshelves everywhere too for the books.
Books in every room with bookshelves on the books. And
you know they make devices now where you can just have thousands of books.
Of a digital shelf.
Yeah, we have
exactly.
Okay, here's a real question. How would you advise a couple where one of the spouses is quick to anger, and then now they have seen one of their children being quick to anger as well? We'll start with that, and then I'll follow up with one of their questions.
Well, we learn how to fight or disagree in a marriage because of what we saw at home. So whatever we saw in the home, that's what we model in our marriages today. So that's very telling that they're saying the kids are now figuring out how to fight. I would say, and I said this on the panel Sunday, you can't fight someone who doesn't fight back. You just need to keep remembering that. I mean, it's like, I used to do mixed martial arts, and when a guy says, I'm done, you can still punch the guy or submit the guy, but he's done. You're not really fighting, and you stop. So I would say you need to teach yourself to be hesitant to respond quickly, and eventually they'll know. I mean, that's what, when we disagree on certain things, the first one to stop, I said this jokingly, is like the hot potato. Like, okay, now you have to be the one to apologize. So we now jokingly try to see who can first stop arguing or responding, and then you can't really fight with somebody like that.
Kandi, it seems like based on the number of questions we got that there are a lot of husbands or wives who are dealing with husbands who are either not Christians or not living for Christ, who they claim to be Christians. What would your advice be to a wife whose husband is like that? Maybe they are the one who gets angry. How do you influence that husband? How do you relate to them without just being passive?
I mean, that's one in prayer. I mean, for the most part, you have to really be on your knees about that, and how you're going to respond. And I mean, the Bible tells us, they can be one without a word, And so I would say,
what do you mean by that?
Like just
it could be one
their
over.
actions.
Yeah, like one over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think obviously prayer would be number one, and then that wife or that husband, whichever, being consistent in their own walk with the Lord. because that's how they have to live for themselves first, and then, you know, for the marriage. So that's, I mean, it would take me a little bit to think about that, but off the top of my head, I'm saying prayer and being consistent in their own walk.
So this may be just what you're talking about, Pastor, a battle that's not necessarily fought with the other person, but is fought in prayer and
Yeah, and I've
how you
learned
live.
this years ago. Like, if you want to change your home, you ask God to change you. If you want to change your workplace, you ask God to change you. The problem, that's not how we think, though. We think, well, no, but he's the problem, or she's the issue, it's her. And that's not how life works. You can't change anybody. I mean, and that's why I was counseling a couple of some friends of mine. The guy was a friend of mine. He married later in life. He's in his 50s. Both of them had never been married in years and years, and they have all these things in the marriage. And he was like, man, she blames me for this, and she says I do this, and I don't love her, and I don't meet her needs. And he said, man, I just wish she would do this, and I keep telling her to do. And I said, brother, first of all, let me stop you. You have to stop trying to change her, because you can't change her, but you can ask God to change your heart. And so I told him, stop trying to fix her. Don't do that anymore. So today, he told me this morning, he said, the last 2 weeks have been the best 2 weeks of our marriage. She calls me the model husband, is what he said. And I said, wow, that's pretty interesting when you stop trying to fix your spouse, right? And you let God. So her thing is she gets a lot of women to read The Power of a Praying Wife.
Yeah.
You could talk about that. And that's
good.
helped a lot of women.
It's a book?
Yeah, it's a book, and I think it's like a prayer a day, so it'll give you a little bit on kind of like a little bit of a devotional, and then you have a prayer, a specific prayer to pray over your husband, but really and truly, it's dealing with you too, and it's just so good. I mean, any type of a book that will kind of guide you a little bit about who your husband is and why he is the way he is, and then also that can direct you like through prayer is a win. So Power of a Praying Wife.
Yeah, there were several questions about what do you do with when there's something your spouse does that just aggravates you or gets on your nerves or is a pet peeve.
It's good.
And maybe that can be dealt with by prayer.
Well,
Like,
it can, and
you.
here's the thing. This is what I've learned. Because there are a few things that Robby does that I'll be like, oh my gosh, you know, like so.
Like what?
Okay, for instance.
Oh my gosh. Here we go.
Okay, so now he's gotten better at this, but this is just one thing that he used to kind of do. Like he would go
Before this series, the church had a perspective of me that is completely destroyed
It's
now.
so great.
Yeah,
So
you
great.
keep telling me it's great.
That was
It's
like
not,
a plastic
It doesn't feel
facade.
great to me.
It wasn't real.
Okay, good.
It
Yeah,
wasn't
I'm a jerk and I'm lazy and I don't
So
know.
he
You're like
will-
everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay, basically I'm like everybody else watching.
Yeah.
Exactly, which is true.
Candy.
Okay,
You were saying?
He used to, yes. He used to like go into the kitchen and like any cabinet that he went into remained open. Okay? No lie. This is true. You know this is true. Okay, so like the medicine cabinet.
Well,
open.
you never know when you're going to need to come back to it.
Oh,
Yeah.
my
So
goodness.
you never know when you're going to need to come back to the cabinet.
It didn't matter. And he would go into 10
Multiple cabinets?
multiple
and
cabinets.
all the doors would be open.
And they would just be open. I wish I would have taken pictures.
Sometimes.
And so I'd
Me
be like,
too.
what is so hard about shutting the cabinet door?
That's a logical question.
Yeah. So that's like just one thing. So now I could be like,
Oh,
you know,
you have more.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Oh yeah. So we know that the trash is always an issue.
Yeah,
okay?
always.
better,
We've
though.
heard.
Getting
We've
better.
Yeah, so we have 2 trash cans now, but they're typically always full. So here's the point. When something bothers me, I can choose to be aggravated or upset or like tell him about it, you know, why can't you shut the cabinets? Why can't you, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And for me, I am trying to have less stress in my life. Less stress is best. That's my motto. So I can either holler and get upset or aggravated about something very minimal, or I can just embrace it and do it for him. Now, this is not always the case because I will reach a limit at some point, and I'm like,
The trash does pile up.
but I try, for the most part, I just try to embrace it. So if I see the trash full, every now and then I'll say, hey, can you take out the trash? But most of the time now, I take it out for him. Because I'm like, this is just not a big deal.
Is that not just teaching him not to take the trash out?
Well, it might be,
take
but
it out for him is a relative term. She takes it out and sets it right next to the trash can.
Okay.
So I can see that
So
I
she
didn't.
is telling
so
you.
I can see I should have taken the trash out.
no, but I'm not doing it for that reason.
Oh,
I'm
really?
just, really,
Oh,
I'm
really?
taking it out to help you. And then I just set it there because I don't want to go walk out to the garbage
But
can.
would you
and put it in.
say, Robby, is it too much?
But conviction
to
does
close
set
the
in when I walk
cabinets?
out and see both trash bags next to the trash
Well,
cans.
that's where her prayers have come in this way. You're getting convicted.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But do you tell
exactly.
him, hey, could
She
you
does.
just close the cabinets?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, she tells me.
Okay.
That's the difference, too. When something's bothering you, you need to tell the person,
Yes.
like, hey, it's funny, the way I do it with Kandi is,
Yes.
I'm not saying anything. But
No, tell us.
No, don't give us any
I'm not getting any
examples.
examples. But what I will say is,
I want to know an example.
well, I don't know any off the cuff, but I didn't prepare for this. But I will say,
Kandi was ready with hers.
she knows this because I've done this to her. I said, I just think it's funny that when you do this, and she'll say, that's because you don't like it. I said, no, I just think it's funny that you do this.
But
you know?
it really is because you don't like
But
it.
I really hate it. But anyway, yeah, I really hate it. I really hate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we have been talking a lot about conflict resolution or dealing with differences, a single person asked this question. I'm 25 and single. Marriage doesn't seem appealing because of the very real stories I hear all the time, sometimes even in your sermons. I know Paul recommends singleness in 1 Corinthians 7, but I do desire to build the kingdom of God with my spouse and have a family. Is it better to stay single or to get married? For either of you.
It's good.
Yeah, I would say, well, what Paul says in that context is it's better to stay single because when you're married, if you have a chance that your spouse is not going to be on the same page as you ministerially. So we know people who the husband is passionate or the spouse is, or the wife's passionate, but the husband's not. And so I know people who are out of quote unquote full-time ministry because the spouse is like, hey, I was supposed to be an accountant. I'm not going to be a pastor, right? So that's what he's saying in the text. But what he says is, so if he's saying if you can be single to advance the kingdom, you're not going to have things of the world where you have to care for. Because when you're married, you can't just leave it all and go. You have a spouse to care for, or you have kids to care for. Mm-hmm. However, he said, if you're going to burn with lust, meaning you have a desire for to be married and desire for certain things, then you probably should be married so that you don't fall in temptation and sin throughout your entire life. So I would say that number one is you're asking the right question. I mean, not a lot of people are asking those questions. No. So that's
meaning, should I get married or not?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because you're asking, okay, should I get married? Should I not get married? That's a great question to ask. I would say if you could be single, be single. We don't talk about this a lot, but I would say if you can be single, be single. If you consider marriage, you have to have certain non-negotiables of the husband or wife you're marrying. Number one is they have to be a believer, and not by name only, not by show up on, they have to have a relationship with Christ, following Christ, and they have to be on the same page as certain things. And that's why premarital counseling is so important.
Yeah.
Couples that don't do premarital counseling, oh, we're in love. Love will get us through it. Well, love starts to wane, or the infatuation of love wanes months after marriage, and now.
And usually that counseling is just helping you communicate about things that could potentially be issues in the future. Mm-hmm. Kandi, anything to add to that about whether someone should stay single or be married?
The question was, I think she said it in there that, seeking first. She's got to seek first his kingdom no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I would say, if there is the desire in her heart for companionship and to be married, that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think, she needs to know what the Lord is telling her to do and to be obedient to that. But either way, it's a win. If she stays single and she serves the Lord for the rest of her life, praise the Lord. And if she gets married, I will say if she decides to pursue marriage and get into a relationship, not to settle. And if there are red flags, to run. Don't be trying to force something or make it work. She truly has to be obedient to what the Lord is calling her to do, and whatever she has a peace about, in either situation.
So, is one state, whether married or single, more godly or more holy than the other one?
There are a lot of issues you won't have to deal with if you're single. That marriage relationship.
Responsibilities, a lot of responsibilities.
But God's not more pleased with you if you're married versus if you are single.
No, but you look at the Bible gives us examples. Obviously, Paul was not married, so Paul was able to travel. Paul could have never done what he did married. I mean, let's just be, Paul, you're going where again? Yeah, I'm going out west to Rome.
Be back in 6 months.
Yeah, back in 6 months.
Yeah.
Really? Or a year and a half. I'm going to Corinth for a year and what? So there's give and take with all of it. You know?
Yeah, a real world example I think about is the Bible translation that we're doing in a very difficult country that our church is participating in. The lead Bible translator there is a single girl who probably could not be doing the work she's doing if she were married or had a family.
That's true.
So her singleness allows her to serve God.
We were just in the Dominican Republic. We met a girl who was single, and same thing, serving the Lord.
The Lord
single.
could call her to be single for a season.
Sure.
And then obviously, you know, maybe get married later in life or down the road.
So Kandi, can you speak to what you just alluded to about not settling?
Yes.
That seems like that would become more of an issue the older you get as you're single. What do you mean by that?
Well, okay. So when I became a Christian, and I was a believer for, 3-4 years before I met Robby. And so I went out on a lot of dates, And there was a particular guy that was a Christian, came from a great family. Everybody thought, oh, y'all are like this perfect couple or whatever. And there was just something in me that wasn't like getting it. Like I was like, man, am I putting up a wall? Am I trying to am I being resistant to what the Lord has for me kind of a thing? He didn't even do anything bad. But at the end of the day, I was like, I don't think I could submit to this guy for some reason. There was something obviously missing. Now, I could have settled and said, this is just me, I'm being dumb, whatever,
I'm getting older, he's a Christian.
Yeah, when am I going to find another person like this guy?
Yeah.
He's got all the qualities.
I could have done that because everybody in our life, our families and everything were like, this is great, And I just couldn't do it, and I didn't, thank God. Because, everything on paper was great, but there was just something that the Lord was intentionally holding back. And when I met Robby, all that kind of started to make sense because I was like, everything that was missing was here. And so had I settled, I would have just been miserable, And, he would have been a great person, but it just wasn't the person that God had for me. And so I would just say, when and if the Lord is doing something, he's withholding something from a relationship and you're kind of trying to force it or make it work, listen to that. Be mindful of that and do not settle for whatever reason.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You said in your mind you couldn't picture him leading your relationship or leading your family.
Right.
So how do you, as a wife, how would you encourage your husband, you're already married, your husband who is not currently the spiritual leader of your home, how would you as his wife encourage him to do that? How would you help him become the spiritual leader of your relationship and of your home?
Step up. Do it. God's called you to do it.
Heart, yeah.
And for, I'm a strong woman, okay? My mama raised me to be a strong woman, have a strong personality, strong opinions, and all those things. I still want to be led by my husband, and I want him to take on that role. Now, granted, I help, and we do things to help one another, but I want that leadership. And I said this, I think, last week on the panel. I trust Robby with all of my heart, and I know that the Lord is guiding him to lead our family. But more than I trust Robby, I trust the Lord. That is my ultimate trust, and all goes into the Lord. And so even if there's something that Robby doesn't do, that if he does something I don't quite agree with, or whatever the case may be, which is very rare, but at the end of the day, that's who I'm trusting. I'm trusting the Lord, and the Lord is going to lead Robby to guide our family. So I would just tell that, obviously, prayer. I don't want to keep saying that, but that's the truth. Praying about it, and then just encouraging your husband, listen, God has created you to be the spiritual leader. I want you to be the spiritual leader. And then allowing him to be the spiritual leader. And not trying to control everything and not trying to manipulate and scheme, because as women, that's what we do.
And you think even if he's not leading in a spiritual way, still demonstrating that you're allowing him to lead is helpful?
Unless he's calling you to do something that,
is sinful.
Yeah, absolutely. You obey the Lord, but I would say you definitely need to be encouraging him to kind of take that role. But if it's anything that would be sinful or anything like that, then no, you don't want to.
Most of the problems in marriages, I think, stem from the husband and the wife either or not knowing the roles in the marriage and not functioning in those roles. Now, the husband as a spiritual leader doesn't mean he always makes every decision and says my way or the highway. Spiritual leader means you're seeking the Lord, what's best for your family, and you're making these decisions together. Now, in a family, you may have a strong-willed or a strong-willed woman and a more passive husband. That's fine, and some of the people listening have that. Doesn't mean he can't be the spiritual leader of the home. And that's a great challenge for men to stay learning and growing. Like, what if we actually were a disciple? Because the word disciple, we think, is just follower of God. It's more than that. At the root, it means learner. So what if we always were learning and always were growing in our family and in our relationship with the Lord? I think things would be different.
And it probably comes back to the personal relationship with God that you were talking about. Like, before this husband can be a strong spiritual leader, he has to have a strong spiritual life.
That's right.
A strong relationship
And
with
I think
God.
there's going to be some cases where, if the husband is not a believer or not the spiritual leader, and the mom is, at that point in time for that season, then, discipling their kids, like, they need to still go on and do what they know is right, even if the husband is not taking on that role.
Yeah.
Okay, changing subjects just a little bit. We talked about finances on Sunday in the short amount of questions that we had, because it's such a divisive subject, I guess. Some folks asked, what is your opinion on having separate bank accounts? Like, husband has his own bank account, wife has her bank account.
I mean, I know people who do that. I think, this is a personal opinion now, the Bible doesn't speak on this. I would say that could be an issue because you have a tendency to do secret things, like we said. That doesn't give a picture of the two becoming one. Now, you can have multiple bank accounts. We have a savings account, we have bank, different things like that. But you have your account, I have my account. I think that just breeds disconnection. The two are becoming one. It's we over me, and that just it just feels like I over we kind of deal.
My question would be why? Like, why do that? If you're, you know what I'm saying? You just put both of your money in the same account,
Yeah, some people may say, well, I've been working a long time. We met later in life. Well, that could have been Kandi. Remember, when I met Kandi, I didn't have much. I mean, I was a struggling, itinerant, traveling preacher. Kandi had a job full-time. She had a retirement account. She had a car. She had a lot of things that I was struggling to get because I had just lost everything, in the world. So she could have said, hey, man, listen, this is my money. This is my retirement. This is my bank account. But we came together. And that's a wonderful picture of the righteousness of Christ at salvation. Because at salvation, Christ doesn't say, oh, man, you blew it, so you can't have all the access to heaven. When you get saved, the imputed righteousness of Christ is deposited into your bank account. And you have access freely to the kingdom of God. And so that's why marriage, we're not talking about this much, but marriage is a picture of the gospel. So for people who say, I don't want to be married, I just don't think I think it's hard. I think it's difficult, it's overwhelming, why get married? We get married because we preach the gospel through our marriage. Christ, the husband is Christ, the wife is the church. It gives a picture to a lost world of what the gospel is.
Someone asked this question. Pastor, you said that in your sermon that we need to be selfless and do things that our spouse likes to do. What if the only thing my husband likes to do is to shoot pool, play darts, and gamble when we truthfully don't have any extra money to spend? What do you do then?
Well, you nix the gambling, and you play pool with them.
How would you nix the gambling? Say, no more gambling?
No more gambling.
Yeah, well, that's what we do in our home.
Yeah.
She says, no more gambling to you.
No more gambling. That's
So you would say...
Rig likes to take out his little, this is
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I made a mistake a couple weeks ago.
He's
I
like,
started
"Let's
telling
play
stories
poker."
of me growing up, which they like to hear, but my parents were in town, and it got out of hand, and we talked about the time one summer I went and gambled at 19 with the fake ID, and by the time my parents took me, this is not...
You're telling your children these stories.
Bad.
Well, I'm not condoning this, but my dad said we had known Robby gamble for like 3 years, from 19 to 21. This is what my parents did for my 21st birthday. They took me to the casino.
Oh, boy.
And the guy walking in says to me, hey, high roller, to me. My dad's like, high roller? And I'm like, oh, man, he must know me from somewhere else. Well, it's because I've been in the casino for 3 years straight. But anyway, so I'm telling my kids this. And so the next day, we go in the living room. They got saving jars, you know, so where all their money is save and spend and all that. So Riggs got all his jars open. He's got like $31 bills, riders across, and they're going to gamble over Go Fish. Yeah.
No lie, yeah.
So number one, we're not going to
doing
gamble in this home. And number two, we're not going to do it over Go Fish.
And every single night when we put them to bed, every night, Riggs like, Mom, tell me a story. I'm like, I don't have a story. What do you mean you don't have a story? Tell us stories like Dad. You know, Dad's got all these stories. And I'm like, well, Dad's life was much more interesting than mine because I've got nothing for you. Like, nothing.
Well, you got stories.
I really don't.
You got stories.
But
what I would tell this
not your kind of stories.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we jokingly call you Forrest Gump because you have so many stories.
Yes, I know.
I hear some that which one did you tell 2 weeks ago? I'd never heard before.
I don't know. Okay, but back to the person. I would say the gambling's an issue, obviously. Yeah. And the reason you don't gamble because you perpetuate a system of impoverishing people. That's why you don't gamble. You're saying, well, my little gambler's like, yeah, but you're part of a system that is impoverishing people, so you don't gamble.
And it can be an addiction. Gamble. I mean, it just leads to issues.
And obviously it is, because they don't have any money.
But you're suggesting that, hey, if playing pool is not sinful or playing darts is not sinful, then why don't you?
Yeah, we used to have a pool table and we would play, or if we've gone on vacation and there's a pool table, Robby and I'll play. But I mean, that's totally
It may
fine.
be the environment he's playing in or the other things that come along with that, drinking or whatever, because she does mention later drinking that he has.
Listen, I have drinking.
So it could be that there are other things in that environment where the pool is taking place that she doesn't want to be.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
that's probably the environment.
Yeah, I'm not. Don't go to no bar or no billiard room.
You might need to buy a dartboard for the home. But the key there is communication, because the fact that she does nothing for her and he's doing everything selfish. See, that's a problem. In most marriages, unfortunately, by the time they address the problem, it's too late. The cancer is already on the arm. It's visible. When there was a spot, you should have gone in and said, man, it's just like a cancer. If you have a spot, you don't just say, oh, let me see that thing grow. Hey, I think that's cancer. It's not cancer. That's not a big deal. And then by the time it's too big, you go in and it's almost too late. That's most marriage problems. So when you start to have disagreement, you're not on the same page, you're not clicking, that's when you go to counseling. And that's when you go seek help, I think.
Does it say that where he goes to do these things? Like, is he going to a bar or something?
No, it doesn't say.
I was going to say, take the money that you spend on gambling, buy yourself a pool table, keep it at your house.
Invite some friends
Problem
over.
solved.
Yeah. There you go. Simple.
It's probably a little more complicated than that, but great advice. Great advice.
A little bit more complicated.
I think this all.
What I'm getting at is that the issue is deeper.
Sure.
Than just him or
these
her.
activities.
Yeah. I mean, if he's wanting to go and be in certain environments and participate in certain things, that's the issue. It's not that his wife doesn't want to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's if you want a solution, take the money from gambling, buy your pool table.
Robby, you talked. You said that even that issue is a communication one. Multiple questions about just premarital discussions. I think that's why you said premarital counseling is so important and helpful. Did you guys talk about things like money or how many kids you want to have? What are some of the things you discussed before you got married?
Golly, it's been 15 years. It's hard to remember. I do remember one thing.
Money was a big deal. We talked about money.
Yeah, we knew money was
like how to handle it?
Well, not really how to handle it. The main thing was I just wanted to make sure he was a tither. That's all I cared about. Do you tithe your money?
The backstory on that is,
were you currently a tither, Robby?
I was.
Thank God.
But here's the thing. She's passionate about this because she was raised in a home and in an environment where there was a lot of struggle financially. And even today still, there's still struggle in families financially. So she learned that, or she deduced at a young Christian age, my family didn't put God first financially, therefore they struggled. So we're going to put God first financially, and we're going to trust God to take care of us. So that's her background. My background was when the plate came by on Sunday morning, the way we gave it, the Gallaty family, we took change out of our pocket. Hey, you got a $5, honey? You got a, yeah, I could put the, And that's how we put money in. So I didn't know anything about giving or trusting the Lord.
So
Finances.
it wasn't as big of a priority to you as it was to Kandi.
No, but then
You
I
had
got
to reconcile
saved,
that.
and I started hanging with David Platt 8 months later, and David said, this is what a Christian does.
Yeah.
God gave you 100%, the least you can do is give him back 10%,
yeah.
right? So that's the reason we started doing it.
So there were certain things like that we talked about. One thing we didn't talk about was having kids. I think I just assumed, we would have kids and that sort of thing. But I think you at one point didn't even think you would ever have kids.
No, I would have been fine, honestly, without kids. I mean, full disclosure, it's a big deal for Kandi to hear that today. And
We have a counselor
I've
here
told her
today.
that since then. But I wasn't a big kid person. I still am not a kid person.
You
I
have
don't
two.
pick up babies on
You
Sunday.
love your
on
two.
He loves his two.
I love my two, and which is funny. But my dad was almost the same way. Like, he wasn't a big kid person, and now he can't imagine. And I can't either. I love my kids. Coached basketball last night. Spent time all night with them. I love my kids.
You would have missed out because you were such a good dad.
Well, thanks, but I didn't know, right? I didn't know.
Yeah.
But those are little things. So let me give you an example. Counseling a couple recently, got married. She lived in another state way out west. He lived here. And she was under the assumption that they'd get married and go back to California. And he's like, go back to California? We're living here in Nashville. And she's like, no, that's what we're going to do. Well, he's married now. So now they're having to work out a deal where 6 months they're going to live here, 6 months they're going to live, and that was never in the plans. And so he's asking me, what do I do? My wife's telling me this, and I was like, bro, you're married. You have to acquiesce to your wife. Your loyalty now is to your wife. And so that's the kind of things you learn in marriage. I mean, counseling.
Even something as simple as where we're going to live.
Yeah.
And even like staff members, we talk about this at Long Hollow, and we started doing this more recently. When we're interviewing the spouse of a staff member, we say this, we talked about this probably before, but we ask the spouse we're hiring, not do you tolerate ministry, but do you celebrate ministry? Because we don't want someone on staff with us whose spouse doesn't like the ministry and just putting up with me. We want pastoral staff members' wives who celebrate the ministry with them, because there's going to be a disconnect if not. So
Well, and I think in ministry, there are a lot of sacrifices that are made that involve family. And so
good point.
it's a lot easier if both spouses are part of a team that are serving together.
yeah, it's good.
If we could change the subject just a little bit, we haven't talked much about divorce or remarriage. And I think a lot of people have experienced divorce. Could you talk just a little bit about how do you get through that season? Is it okay to remarry? Some have even asked, is my life over at that point when it comes to relationships?
Yeah, I would say for years we've looked at divorce as kind of like the scarlet letter in church life, and it's like my life's over. What am I going to do now? So I would say, one, divorce, obviously, like any sin or any issue in our life that we engage. So the way you look at sin is, it's a long discussion, but the way you look at sin is, any sin can be forgiven by God, whether it's divorce or adultery or immorality, idolatry. Any sin can be forgiven by God, but there are repercussions on earth where you live in the kingdom for the sins you commit. So, meaning if you're divorced, you're not going to be separated from God, just like if you murder and you ask forgiveness, or adultery. But there are repercussions on earth for certain sins. I'm going to talk about sexuality this week, and I'm going to talk about how sexual sin is one of the only sins whereby you inflict damage to yourself. Sexual sin is like drinking strychnine poison for yourself. Whereas the other sins you commit outside of the body, sexual sin you commit to yourself, okay? Not to give the sermon away Sunday, but that's part of it. But divorce is similar in the sense of there are ramifications for divorce for the rest of your life that you have to live with. So while the divorce is not the unpardonable sin at all, there are going to be issues. For example, you're going to have kids now, if you have kids, in different places at different times during holidays. Now you have to deal with an ex-husband that's sometimes not cordial, that relationship. You've got to deal with laws and child support and vacations and all these other things. So that's the challenging part, the dark side of a divorce. Now, can you move on and get married again and have a fulfilling, God-honoring, Christ-exalting marriage? Absolutely, and some people do, and we know a lot of people who do that. Many people in our church do that. So I would just say the first thing is if you're going through a divorce, whether you ask for it or whether it's you're doing, you need to ask the Lord's forgiveness for going through that or the things you've done. It's always two sides. I mean, granted, you always hear, man, you believe what he did or she did. There's always two sides of a relationship, which I've always trained myself. When I hear one person telling me it always sounds bad, I realize there's always two sides. But I would say if you're divorced, number one is use this as a season to work on you, right? Because in divorce, what you find, a lot of people hurt and fractured and lives are ravaged from, experiences like that. And what happens is they want to blame the other person. Well, so-and-so did this, and he was always here, and he was always gambling and playing pool and out. Yeah, okay. Well, let's back up. Was there a reason he was out? So work on you. You'll never get this season, if you're listening and you're divorced right now and you're single, you'll never get this season back. I know you think you will. I know you think it's long, but God's going to teach you some great lessons to work on you before you get, because the last thing is when I looked at it, when I was waiting for Kandi, I looked at it as I needed to get to the place where I was ready to receive a woman, because Kandi was unlike any woman I'd ever met before. She was beautiful, she was intellectual, but she loved the Lord, and she loved the Lord. And that was the most attractive thing to me, that she loved the Lord. But I was not at a place to receive her when I was a new Christian. If she would have come in my life, I would have wrecked that relationship and then would have looked back like some people and think, man, I had it and I blew it. So you have to get to a place where you can receive God's best. And some of you are hurting and fractured and have codependency issues, and you have anger and you have bitterness and you have shame. So I would say, if you're divorced right now, use this as a season for God to work on you, to prepare you prayerfully for someone else if he has someone down the road. I think that's why people get divorced multiple times. They get married, divorced, married, divorced, married, divorced. Why? They never worked on them. They felt like the way to fix them was to add someone to the mess they're already in, and now you just have more of a mess because you have two broken people trying to fix each other. And the old adage I say, when you're serving the Lord, Kandi was serving the Lord, I was serving the Lord, the tendency, the temptation is we run to each other. That's what most people do. You're running hard to the Lord, you meet each other, and you throw the whole thing out the window, you run to each other. That's not a triangle. The triangle is you run to the Lord, and you still run to the Lord, and then he brings you close together. And that's what I would tell people.
And when you say it's not the unpardonable sin, there's life after divorce, you're not downplaying the seriousness of divorce or that we should avoid divorce at all costs, are you?
Yeah, there's only one thing God hates in Malachi. He says, I hate one thing in Malachi, it's divorce. God hates divorce. He abhors divorce. And
why do you think that is?
because
You're distorting the gospel,
Yeah,
the picture of the gospel.
Yeah.
Because our marriage relationship is supposed to represent
Yeah.
God's relationship with us.
When that happens, you're showing the world that Jesus Christ abandons his people. Or you're showing the world that the church abandons Jesus Christ, and that is not the case.
or Jesus is not enough. So the church, the bride, the woman, has to look for something else to satisfy because her husband, who's Christ, is not enough. It's way bigger than, as a Christian particularly, it's way bigger. And marriage is a Christian institution. So I tell people who say, I want to get married, but I don't want God in our relationship. And I say, well, what do you get married for? Because matrimony, marriage is a Christian, God-ordained institution where he's the centerpiece of the institution. Go to Justice of the Peace, no disrespect, but you don't want me as a pastor to officiate a wedding where you don't want God in it, right? Because that's what marriage is. So I would say, the couple is a picture of the gospel, and you distort the gospel when you divorce. And that's why it's such a horrible thing. And not only just for the families, obviously, we talked about, but for the people too.
Talk a little bit about getting outside help. You mentioned a couple books. Y'all talked about premarital counseling. I think a lot of people have a stigma about marriage counseling. And a lot of times one person will want to go and the other's like, there's no way, I'm not doing that. We're just going to talk about my problems or whatever. But
Kandi and I right now, I literally got the text and I was sitting here, are meeting with a couple in the next couple weeks or month to have them help us in our relationship, a couple a little further down the road than us. And so we are always, and I've always had life coaches and pastors and mentors, and Kandi as well, So we're always trying to work on us and our relationship. So I want people to, I don't want you to think I go to a counselor, it's a bad thing.
Right.
It's not a bad, I know many pastors, mega church pastors, name them all right now, you know most of them, who say we're always in counseling because you don't go to counseling just, you don't prepare for the hurricane when the storm arrives. It's too late. If you see, and we used to see this when hurricanes would come through, the neighbors are like, man, it's too late. You know, they're boarding up the house, the wind's blowing, they're trying to board. It's too late at that point. You prevent the storm and prepare before the storm comes 2 or 3 days before. And the same thing goes with your marriage.
I think many people, if not all people, could benefit from counseling in their life regularly. Doesn't even matter if it's a divorce issue or something completely different. There is nothing wrong with counseling. Like that is a good thing. To process, you know, and just to talk to someone, that's therapeutic. So I think it's definitely a good thing. That's a good thing. And we don't want to wait until like it's too late. And then I would say if the divorce has been the issue, divorce care would be a great ministry to get involved in and just kind of go all in with that and just let yourself, you know, kind of heal and let the Lord work on you. And if that's the case, like if you're kind of fresh off of a divorce and that sort of thing, like Robby was saying, you want to use this season for the Lord to really work on you. I think we have to get to a place where Jesus Christ is enough for us. And whatever that means for everybody in their own situations, but for someone who's kind of fresh off of that maybe, it may mean, like Robby's saying, let the Lord just work on you. Use this season for yourself, you know, and pursue help at all costs, whatever that means for you to be as healthy as you can be from this point forward. Let Jesus be enough for you in this season and just watch what he'll do.
Counseling, one thing I'll say this before we close, counseling reveals the blind spots in your life that you don't see. And everybody has a blind spot. And if you're listening, you're saying, I don't have a blind spot, that's the blind spot. Because we all have them, right? We all have them. It's called blind spots for a reason because you don't think you do it. Like, I'm not mean and yell. I don't raise my voice. No, you're raising your voice now. Oh, really? Yeah, you're doing it right. You see? So we all have them. So what counseling does is it takes a middleman or a person who is outside of the relationship who can speak into the relationship to help you communicate better. That's what counseling does. So.
Well, here at Long Hollow, there are multiple resources in regards to counseling that are available to our members, both pastoral counseling. I think most of it starts there with meeting with a staff member, a pastor, or someone who's qualified to just talk through some of the issues. And then if the situation warrants more professional clinical counseling, then we have resources that we refer people to counselors, godly Christians that are licensed counselors that walk with individuals or couples through those situations. And so I'd encourage you, if you're in that place, to go on the websites and to contact our member care team, talk to them first, just set up an appointment and come in and talk to someone about what's going on in your life, and they can help you navigate the extent of counseling. What's the best counseling that's suited for your situation? Anything else as we close?
That's good.
Next week's going to be great.
Getting ready for Sunday.
Next week's going to be fun. I have no idea what questions we're going to ask that will be appropriate, but we'll find some. We have another couple in addition to you guys that will be here. So that will be fun. And then we're talking about some special guest parents the following week for the parenting week. If we can get Bob and Margaret Gallaty to come and be on the panel.
I've already ran that by them.
They're gonna do it?
One wants to come, can't wait. The other one, I ain't doing it.
Was that Mom?
You can guess who that is.
Dad's like, I'm ready. I'll go without her. I don't care. I'll go without her.
Well, we'll have to see
Dad.
who we have for that week. But if you're in Middle Tennessee, join us on Sunday at one of our 2 locations as we talk about sex and intimacy. Y'all have a great week.